changes. At its peak, MySpace was not just the biggest social network in the world, it was the internet itself for an entire generation. 115 million people visited it every single month. It had outranked Google, it had outranked Yahoo, it had become the most visited website in the United States. And then within a few years, it was effectively gone. Not slowly faded, structurally dismantled, sold off, and repositioned into something almost unrecognizable. The question is not simply why it lost. The question is how something that dominant could collapse so completely, and what the mechanism of that collapse actually was. MySpace launched on August 1st, 2003. The internet already had social spaces, forums, chat rooms, early blogging platforms, but nothing had unified them into a single destination with profiles, music, and messaging under one roof. The founders built something that solved a real problem for a specific audience: musicians, artists, and teenagers who wanted a public identity online. That specificity was the early engine. It was not trying to be everything to everyone. It was a place where a band in Los Angeles could post songs and find fans, and where those fans could build pages that looked and felt like their own. That combination of music, identity, and community was genuinely new at scale. The model worked because it gave users something no platform had offered before at that size: genuine creative control. You could change your background, embed music, write HTML directly into your profile. It was chaotic and loud and often visually overwhelming. But that was the point. The platform did not impose a uniform identity on its users. It let them construct one. That freedom attracted a community, and the community attracted more users, and the flywheel began to spin. MySpace also played a meaningful role in the early growth of companies like YouTube and helped launch a developer ecosystem that included Zynga, RockYou, and Photobucket. It was not just a social network, it was infrastructure for an emerging internet economy. By 2005, the growth was significant enough that News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch's media conglomerate, acquired MySpace for $580 million. That acquisition accelerated distribution and resources, and the numbers kept climbing. By June 2006, MySpace had surpassed both Yahoo Mail and Google Search to become the most visited website in the United States. That is not a social media milestone. That is an internet milestone. During the 2008 fiscal year, the platform generated $800 million in revenue. The cultural footprint matched the financial one. MySpace was where music broke. It was where teenagers lived online. It was where the internet had a face and a soundtrack. But April 2008 is the number that matters most, and not only because it marks the peak. At that moment, MySpace had 115 million monthly visitors. Facebook, which had been growing rapidly, had reached roughly the same visitor count, and according to the available evidence, somewhat more global users. Two platforms, nearly identical in scale, at the same moment in time. That is not a coincidence. That is a structural warning, and the evidence suggests it went unheeded. The crack had been forming for years before it became visible in the numbers. MySpace had been built fast, and it showed. The platform's open customization, the very feature that made it feel alive and personal, also made it slow, unstable, and difficult to navigate for anyone who was not already invested in it. Profiles loaded with autoplay music and clashing color schemes were a feature to their owners and a liability to everyone else. More critically, the architecture underneath was not built to scale cleanly or to evolve quickly. As the user base grew, the technical debt grew with it. Meanwhile, the News Corporation acquisition had introduced a different kind of pressure. The pressure to monetize aggressively. Advertising inventory expanded. The user experience absorbed the cost. These two forces, technical debt and monetization pressure, were compounding simultaneously, and neither was being resolved. The decisions made under that pressure deepened the structural problem rather than addressing it. Rather than investing in a cleaner, faster product, the platform leaned into advertising revenue. Rather than simplifying the experience to compete with what Facebook was building, a uniform, fast, algorithmically organized feed with real name identity, MySpace doubled down on the customization model that had made it famous. These were not irrational choices in isolation. The revenue was real. The user base was enormous. The logic of protecting what had worked was understandable, but the choices locked the platform into a trajectory at precisely the moment when the trajectory needed to change. Protecting the existing model and evolving the product were treated as compatible goals. The evidence suggests they were not. Facebook's model was the structural opposite of MySpace's: uniform profiles, clean interface, real name identity. Where MySpace had given users a canvas, Facebook gave them a container, and the container turned out to be what most people actually wanted once they had experienced both. The shift was not instantaneous. It happened user by user, demographic by demographic, as Facebook expanded beyond college campuses and into the general population. By the time MySpace recognized the competitive threat as existential rather than manageable, the gap in product quality and user experience had become very difficult to close. The window for a credible response had narrowed considerably. The unraveling accelerated. Users who had built their identities on MySpace began migrating. The musicians and artists who had given the platform its cultural credibility followed their audiences to wherever those audiences had gone. Advertising revenue, which had been the platform's primary financial logic, followed the users. The $800 million revenue year of fiscal 2008 did not repeat. News Corporation, which had paid $580 million for the asset in 2005, eventually sold MySpace in 2011 for approximately $35 million, a fraction of the acquisition price, to a buyer focused primarily on its music-related assets. The brand survived in diminished form, repositioned around music and entertainment rather than general social networking. The developer ecosystem that MySpace had helped launch, companies like Zynga, RockYou, and Photobucket, had long since found other platforms or built their own paths forward. The people who had grown up on MySpace had moved on. The cultural moment it had owned was now owned by someone else, and the infrastructure it had helped build was being used to support a different platform's dominance. The precise mechanism of MySpace's collapse is worth naming carefully because it is not simply a story about a better competitor arriving. It is a story about what happens when a platform's core product decision, in this case, open-ended user customization, becomes simultaneously its identity and its ceiling. MySpace could not easily become faster and cleaner without abandoning what its most loyal users valued. That constraint was not a management failure alone. It was a structural trap built into the product from the beginning, and the acquisition pressure to monetize made it harder, not easier, to escape. The lesson is not that customization is wrong or that acquisitions destroy companies. The lesson is more specific than that. A product's defining feature can be its competitive advantage and the wall that prevents it from evolving at the same time. When a faster, cleaner alternative arrives at scale, and the incumbent cannot change its foundation without losing its identity. The decline is not gradual. The platform that cannot adapt does not slowly lose ground. It falls, and the fall, when it comes, is much faster than the rise.